See, I think, we have had many benefits from democracy. We should be all happy that we have more elections, more governments who are more representative of the people. But having said that, I think we also know the reality that, just because people are elected, it doesn't mean that the country becomes a democracy. So in many, many countries, we now have leaders who are elected, but they do not still have the trust of the people. So I think the time has come. Many things have changed in the reality of Africa and the developing world. Young people are now much more a bigger part of the population. Women have become much more active. Social media is now demanding accountability on a real-time basis. So I think it's time for us to rethink what is the new kind of democracy we need for the future. As you know, as we are speaking right now, we have protests on the streets of Tunisia, Senegal, we've had elections in Nigeria, but people are still having a debate about whether these elections in Kenya and Nigeria truly represented the will of the entire population. So I'm very hopeful, but we should not fool ourselves that we have achieved democratic Africa. We still have a long way to go, and I think it's in the hands of the people to now come together and say, what is it that we want for the future. The point I'm making is that we need a democracy which is relevant in the African context. So we have a tradition of communitarian collective action. We have traditional societies, indigenous societies. We need to respect that. We cannot just take French model or a British model or an American model and say that that is relevant for us. We can take the best of those, but we need to produce a model which works in our context, whether it is in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Global South. I think the time has come for us to rethink what do we need for the future. So Open Society Foundation has worked for decades in Africa, in West, East, South, all parts of Africa, and our job is to support the voices of those who are not heard. So we support organizations, individuals who are fighting for justice, for rights, for democratic space. That is the meaning of open society, that people have a voice. And we do that in whatever ways. There are individuals who are supported through fellowships, scholarships, and organizations who are very prominent organizations, some very small organizations in remote places are supported, and all of this is really to help democracy flourish. You don't need to have these manipulated democracies through elections. That elections are not the only definition. Having a multi-party system is not the only definition of democracy, and I would agree with that. Actually, they're right. So because many of our leaders have used the fact that you have elections to meet their own ends, so that is true. But having said that, if we are going to think of a new system to replace elections for representation, let's come up with that first. If we don't have a better system to just say that we're going to stop elections, I don't think that's a good idea. We need to have elections which are genuine, free and fair. We need democracies which are not pretend democracy. We need real democracies. And I totally agree that these are ideals which we want to achieve. At this point in time, we are just beginning the journey. The point that I have been making is the time has come in 2023 for the people from the Global South to find a way of reimagining democracy for the future. You have to think of all the key stakeholders, and you have to make sure that we come up with a solution which is workable in our context. That doesn't mean that we do not respect the separation of elected representatives from military. The military has its job to do. They're not meant to be having coups and coming to power. So we're not talking about compromising on the principles, but it's also like, for example, faith groups. Not everybody may have the same opinion about faith groups, but faith groups should be very much part of this conversation. I mean, this is one of the challenges in Senegal, right? So, or Mali for that matter, if you don't bring the faith groups into the process of negotiating power, then you have consequences of that. And youth, I mean, you heard today also, young people, we just make these tokenistic statements, yes, Africa is a young country, and yes, but finally they're not in the discussion. They don't have a serious voice. We just give token representation for youth and women. And that is not an option for the future.